There used to be 9 of us. 9 separate human species sharing the same planet, hunting the same forests, raising kids under the same sky. Some were shorter and built like brick walls. Some had brains bigger than ours. One species stood barely 4 feet tall and lived on a tiny island in Indonesia for 700,000 years. Now there's one. Us. And for a long time, the story we told ourselves was simple. The others just couldn't keep up. Bad luck, bad climate, survival of the fittest, nothing personal. It's a comfortable story. It lets everyone sleep at night. But the more scientists dig, the less that story holds up. Because when you actually look at the timing, when you line up exactly where we went and exactly when everyone else disappeared, it stops looking like an accident. It starts looking like a pattern. So today we're asking the real question. Not why did they die out? That's the easy version. The real question is, what did we actually do to become the last ones standing? And once you hear the answer, you're going to look at your own species completely differently. Let's start with the body count. 200,000 years. That's roughly how long Neanderthals ruled Europe and Western Asia before we ever showed up. 200,000 years of ice ages, of mammoths, of brutal winters that would kill a modern human in a weekend. And they didn't just survive it. They thrived in it. Thick bones, massive muscle, a body built like a furnace designed to hold heat and take a beating. These weren't primitive cavemen stumbling around. They were built for that world. Then, somewhere around 70,000 years ago, we showed up. And within a few thousand years, which sounds long until you remember they'd already made it 200,000, the Neanderthals were gone. Coincidence? Let's keep going because it happens again. And again. We push into the Middle East. The local human populations disappear. We cross the ocean and land in Australia 45,000 years ago. The giant animals go extinct, and so does the archaic human population that had lived there for ages. We push into the Americas. And boom, dozens of large species just vanish off the map, along with any trace of whoever came before us. Wherever we walked, something died behind us. Every single time. And it wasn't just the competing humans. It was the ecosystems around them, too. Giant sloths the size of cars. Woolly mammoths that had already outlasted a dozen ice ages. Massive, flightless birds that had never once needed to fear anything walking on 2 legs. All of it, gone, in a wave that lines up almost perfectly with our footprints spreading across the map. Scientists actually have a name for this now. They call it the Overkill Hypothesis. The idea that these extinction waves weren't really about climate at all. They were about us showing up with better tools, better coordination, and absolutely zero natural predators of our own. That's not weather. That's not one bad ice age catching one unlucky species off guard. That's a pattern with our fingerprints all over it. The climate had swung wild before, and everybody survived it fine. The one variable that changed right before they all disappeared was us. But here's where it gets uncomfortable, because if you actually put us head to head with a Neanderthal, one-on-one, no weapons, just bodies, we lose. Every time. Their grip strength alone could crush bone. They used heavy spears to stab mammoths at close range, which tells you everything about how tough they had to be just to eat dinner. And here's the part that really messes with people. Their brains were bigger than ours. Bigger. Stronger. Better adapted to the environment they were already living in. So how does the weaker, smaller-brained species walk in and wipe out the stronger one? It wasn't muscle. It wasn't even better spears. What we had was something you couldn't see, couldn't measure, couldn't fight against with a bigger arm. We had an idea. And that idea turned out to be the single deadliest weapon in the history of this planet. Here's the science behind it. Every social animal has a hard ceiling on how many others it can actually keep track of. Who's trustworthy? Who's a cheat? Who owes who a favor? For chimps, that number sits around 50. For early humans, and probably for Neanderthals too, it was likely about the same. You can only gossip about so many people before the whole system falls apart. Push a group past that number and it splits. It has to. Trust just doesn't scale past strangers. But somewhere around 70,000 years ago, something shifted in our wiring. We didn't get bigger brains. We didn't get stronger. We got something stranger. We got the ability to talk about things that don't exist. spirits, ancestors, gods, tribes, nations, money. None of it is real in the way a rock or a river is real. But once enough people believe the same story, it becomes real enough to build a civilization on. And that's the part nobody expects to hear. Fiction is a weapon. Because if two strangers who have never met both believe in the same god or the same tribal law or the same currency, they can trust each other instantly. They don't need years of friendship. They just need the same story, which means they can trade, share resources, fight side by side. A Neanderthal tribe topped out around 30 or 40 people, because that's the limit of what real relationships can hold. A Sapiens tribe could call in backup from a group 100 miles away, people they'd never even met because they shared the same myth. So when the hard winters hit, the isolated tribe starved alone. And when it came to actual conflict, it wasn't a fair fight. It was never 30 against 30. It was 30 against 500, because we could organize on a scale no other human species had ever managed. They weren't facing individuals, they were facing a network. We didn't beat them with our bodies. We beat them with our imagination. But here's where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming. Because for over 100 years, scientists believed the ending was simple. We showed up, they couldn't compete, and they just quietly disappeared. Clean story, tragic maybe, but tidy. Then in 2010, something changed everything. Geneticists pulled DNA out of ancient Neanderthal bones and lined it up against ours. And what they found wasn't a clean extinction story at all. It was a confession written in our own genetic code. If your ancestry traces back to Europe or Asia, somewhere between 1% and 2% of your DNA is pure Neanderthal, sitting inside you right now. And if your roots go back to places like Papua New Guinea, you could be carrying up to 6% Denisovan DNA, a species we didn't even know existed until a single finger bone turned up in a Siberian cave. We didn't just erase them, we absorbed them. And don't romanticize it. This wasn't some peaceful blending of equals living happily ever after. This was expansion. As we pushed into brutal new environments, freezing tundras, oxygen-starved mountains, we didn't have thousands of years to slowly adapt the way evolution normally works. So we took a shortcut. We picked up their genes on the way through. In cold climates, we absorbed Neanderthal genes that reshaped our skin, our hair, and gave our immune systems a serious upgrade against diseases they'd already spent thousands of years fighting off. High in the mountains of Tibet, we picked up a Denisovan gene that still lets people there breathe comfortably at altitudes that would leave the rest of us gasping. We stole their survival gear, installed it into our own gene pool, and then simply outnumbered them until there weren't enough of them left to survive on their own. Think about how brutally efficient that actually is. We didn't need thousands of generations to slowly evolve cold weather skin or high altitude lungs on our own. We just took theirs. We walked into their territory, absorbed the biological upgrades they'd spent hundreds of thousands of years perfecting, and then used our numbers advantage to make sure the originals didn't stick around to compete for resources. It's not conquest in the way we usually picture it. No armies, no battle lines. Just slow, relentless replacement, generation after generation, until one day there simply weren't enough pure Neanderthals or Denisovans left to keep the population going. They're extinct, technically, but pieces of them are still in you, building proteins in your body right now, while you watch this. So let's go back to where we started. 9 human species, 1 survivor. Why us? It wasn't because we were the toughest. Homo erectus walked this earth for almost 2 million years, longer than we've even existed. It wasn't the biggest brain either. We've already established the Neanderthals had us beat there. We won because we found a loophole biology never accounted for. The ability to invent something that doesn't exist and get millions of strangers to believe in it together. That one shift let us cooperate at a scale no other human species could touch, while every other branch of the family tree stayed locked inside small, isolated groups. We didn't outfight them one by one. We buried them under sheer numbers, organized by nothing but shared belief. And here's the part that should actually keep you up tonight. That exact same trick, the ability to invent shared fiction, is still running the whole show. It's the same tool that put satellites in orbit and cured diseases that used to wipe out entire towns. And it's the exact same tool that built ideologies, started wars, and stacked up enough weapons to end everything in an afternoon. We spent tens of thousands of years wiping out every other version of ourselves to become the only human species left standing on this planet. Which means the only thing left on Earth capable of finishing the job we started is us. Every nation, every currency, every religion, every flag people are willing to die for, it's all the exact same trick that let a handful of tribes on the African savanna outnumber and outlast 8 other human species. We just pointed the weapon at each other instead. Same tool, different target. If you made it this far, you've clearly got some serious focus. Probably that leftover Neanderthal DNA doing the heavy lifting. If you want more of this, the deep, uncomfortable side of our own history, hit subscribe, because there's a lot more where this came from. And I actually want to know what you think. Do you believe we're the final chapter? The species that made it all the way to the end? Or is our own superpower eventually going to be the thing that writes us out too? Drop your take in the comments. Stay curious, stay a little suspicious of the story you were taught. And I'll see you in the next one.